You cook, you clean, you take care of him, you do his freaking taxes. Like, you do it all. You make sure he is happy. You make sure he's comfortable. You make sure he's satisfied. You make sure all of his needs are met. You bend over backwards to make sure he is the happiest man in the world. And after all of that, he leaves you anyway. When this person with this pattern enters a relationship, she's not looking for love or intimacy or connection. Her nervous system is looking to make herself indispensable in someone's life because she has learned that means she's safe. Welcome to the Conscious Love Show. My name is Shane Kohler. I've spent over a decade helping women understand the unconscious patterns driving their relationships and what it actually takes to change them. I'm one of the most direct voices in the modern relationship space and the person who will tell you the truth that most coaches are afraid to name. This show is for anyone who's done settling, done shrinking, and done wondering why love keeps falling short. I'm not here to make you feel better about patterns that aren't serving you. I'm here to name them, help you understand them, and learn how to change them. If you're ready for that, I'm glad you're here, and let's get into it. All right. Hello again, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler on today. As always, pleasure to be back. Looking forward to diving in. And in today's episode, I want to talk about why if you act like a man's wife, he will treat you like his mother. And this episode is for the women who do it all in relationship. You cook, you clean, you take care of him, you do his freaking taxes. Like, you do it all. You make sure he is happy. You make sure he's comfortable. You make sure he's satisfied. You make sure all of his needs are met. You bend over backwards to make sure he is the happiest man in the world. And after all of that, he leaves you anyway. And I know that some of you have been, or maybe are currently in, this exact position, because I talk to you all the time. And you might be asking yourself, if I go so far out of my way to make somebody happy, and they still don't want to be with me, they still leave me anyway, am I just fundamentally unlovable? Is there just something fundamentally wrong with me? Because if my very best and giving everything I have to make my partner happy isn't enough, like, I can't give any more, so what, am I just broken? And what I want to name here early on in today's episode is it is not that there's something fundamentally wrong or fundamentally unlovable about you. It's not that your best isn't good enough. It's that there's a certain pattern, a certain blueprint running your love life, running your intimate relationships. And that pattern is designed to create this very result. I want to say that again. This pattern that's running, being the woman who does everything, who takes care of everything, who is the ultimate provider in a man's life, is a very specific type of survival pattern. And it creates this exact result. So today I'm going to break down exactly how that happens. So this pattern has a name. It's actually part of my relational blueprint system. It's called the caretaker. And I've identified this pattern because over the years, I've worked with thousands of women in all various kinds of situations. And this is something that has shown up again and again and again. So what is the caretaker pattern? Like, what is it really? It is the foundational operating system in the nervous system that says, I am only safe if I am indispensable. And so when this person with this pattern enters a relationship, she's not looking for love or intimacy or connection. I mean, I understand on some level she might be, but that's not what her nervous system is looking for. Her nervous system is looking to make herself indispensable in someone's life. Because she has learned that if she can make herself indispensable, if she can make herself necessary, if she can make herself needed, that means she's safe. And where this gets so insidious is that line between being safe and being loving has become so blurred that she honestly can't tell the difference. Making herself necessary and indispensable, taking care of someone on this level, is what love is to her. And if she were to not do that, she would literally feel like she's being cold or heartless or like she's not caring or doing enough for someone. It's an incredible trap to be in. Because the very way that you express love is the very way that pushes love away. And there are a few dynamics to unpack here, but I think we need to look at first where this comes from. Because this person is often the parentified child. And maybe she was the oldest sibling and she raised her younger siblings. Maybe she was in the home of emotionally absent or physically absent parents and she had to raise herself. Maybe she was in an environment where the adults were ultimately chaotic or helpless or unstable, and she was the emotional caretaker of the family. Sometimes the child can become that emotional circuit that just kind of grounds the family. But early on, whatever the exact conditions were, and it could be this, it could be something else, could be a mix of all of these, but whatever the exact conditions were, she learned very early on that her value was tied to what she could provide or manage or fix. Love and usefulness became so completely fused with each other that she can no longer tell them apart. And often this woman isn't just doing it with her boyfriend or her partner or someone she's dating. She's often doing it with everyone in her life, probably still doing it with her family. Like she probably still is that grounding person for her parents or her siblings. She's still doing it for probably the people she works with, probably her friends. She's the one everyone goes to, the one everyone trusts, the stable one, the secure one, the one who has it all together. Because she's holding it down for everyone. And underneath all of this, she's exhausted. And if I'm talking to you right now, then you know exactly who you are. Underneath all of it, you're exhausted because you've given everything to everyone, but kept nothing for yourself. And there's a part of you that just wants to let your nervous system relax, wants to be able to downregulate, wants to be able to just surrender and just lay back and trust that somebody else is going to hold you. Trust that you could just let go and everything will be okay, that it's not going to all fall apart. And you've maybe never had that in your entire life because even from a young age, you had to hold it all together. And so on some level, you want that. You want someone else to hold you down and you can just collapse and trust that everything will be okay. On the other level, you're absolutely unable to do that. Because doing that feels like a threat to your very existence. Doing that feels like it's like you believe that your place in the world and in relationship comes from being needed. And if you stopped being needed and started needing, it would feel like your significance was being erased. It would feel like the very reason you exist, your very purpose in life was being taken away from you. It's an incredible predicament. But now, it's particularly difficult in her relationship with men. Because with her friends, she's a great friend. At her work, she's a great employee or a great business owner. With her family, she's that rock solid star daughter who always holds everybody down, right? Like it's just, she gets rewarded and validated for it in every area of her life, except for with men. Because with men, she gets used, she gets abused, she gets taken advantage of. And then when she's given it all and there's nothing left to extract from her, they just leave. So for this type of blueprint, it gets really brutal in her intimate relationships because she pours herself out and men just take and take and take and take and take. And then when they're done with her, they just leave. So what's actually happening in her relationship with men? And there are a few things important to name here. So what kind of man ends up with this kind of woman? That's the first question. What kind of man ends up with this kind of woman? Because if we look at the secure masculine frame, a man who is certain of himself, he has integrity, he has power, he has influence, he's man of his own life. Part of his nature is to be a provider. That's the natural expression of the secure masculine, is to be a provider. And she has become the ultimate provider of her own life and all the lives around her. She is the ultimate provider. And realistically, there's not space for two providers in the room. So one of these two is going to have to receive from the other. Now, some people might argue, well, why couldn't he just receive from her? And sometimes he can, and sometimes he often does. And if you're one of these women, you've probably noticed that you've met men and they've spent some time with you and they were willing to receive, but ultimately there was some kind of discontent or friction in the relationship, that maybe a clash of wills to an extent that the two of you couldn't overcome. Some of you might relate to that. So you meet, you get together, you're doing so much for him. And at first he's like, oh, this is really nice. She takes care of me. She cooks for me. But over time, there's like a clash of will. There's a friction that builds up between the two of you because you're both trying to be man of the house, so to speak. And so that's not to say that you couldn't ever provide anything for him and he could never receive it. But as a long-term relational pattern, it doesn't really work. And this would be my challenge. Because in the masculine frame, its highest nature is to be a provider. And that doesn't mean that women have no masculine frame. Women do have their own masculine. Women can be wonderful providers. Women can be amazing providers. Right? So I'm not saying that women can't do that or they're not capable of it. Women are totally capable and often do. But in the masculine frame, his highest expression is to be a provider. And his greatest reward is to be appreciated for what he provides. Like this is foundational to every man. He wants to give something to his partner, give something to his family. And when he gives that, have that admiration that you're my hero. That's the core motivation of every man on the deepest level, is to be the hero. The caretaker pattern is not her highest nature. And this is why there's friction. It's because we have a distorted survival pattern competing in the relationship with him and preventing him from having space to be that provider, preventing him from having space to express his highest nature with the woman he loves. So this is why it's not workable. This is why you can't just say, well, why not just let her be the provider and why not have him just receive? Because of course, there are times when she can be the provider and he can receive. It's not like that's never allowed. But when the baseline when the baseline of the relationship is a distorted, adaptive survival pattern competing with him against his highest nature, there's a friction of will. And a self-respecting man is only going to tolerate that for so long. And so, going back to my original question, what kind of man partners with a woman like this? It's a man who doesn't access that highest nature. A man who has no interest in being a provider. You see, when a woman's energy, when a woman's survival pattern, I should say, not her energy, but when a woman's survival pattern is competing with a man for his ability to express his highest nature, she makes him feel useless. And so he looks into his woman's eyes and I'm sure women have their own version of this, but it's hard for me to express what it's like as a man looking into your woman's eyes. And it's like, all you want to see in those eyes are deep admiration and appreciation for being her man. It's like I said earlier, this is the driving force underneath all masculinity, is to be able to provide for the feminine and look into her eyes and see her looking back with adoration and appreciation. It's like, that's what's driving every man on the deepest levels. Even toxic masculinity is just distortions of that same drive. Toxic masculinity is what happens when men feel incapable of achieving that organically, or when they feel like they have to control it or dominate it or manipulate it. Those are just inauthentic expressions of the same drive. But that's the core masculine drive, is to provide for the feminine and be appreciated for it. And when he doesn't have the opportunity to do that in a relationship, when it's already handled, when he's not needed, he feels useless. And the only man who would stay in that environment indefinitely is a man who is okay with feeling useless. So this is the trap. This is the trap of the caretaker pattern. Is the only men who can stay with you indefinitely are men who their home base is feeling useless. And what you have here is a complete reversal of roles. Instead of him being the provider, like instead of him being in the masculine, he's in the feminine and she's in the masculine. And so she's providing, he's receiving. And what ends up happening is this isn't a husband-wife or, romantic partner relationship. This becomes a parent-child relationship. We often think about masculine and feminine being between a man and a woman. But masculine and feminine are relational energies. So, yes, they exist between a man and a woman, but the masculine is the provider energy and the feminine is the receptive energy, right? So the masculine gives and the feminine receives. And that same energy exists between a parent and a child. So a mother is the masculine agent in relationship to her child. And when a man abandons his own masculinity in relationship with his woman, he becomes like a child. He becomes another dependent that she has to take care of. Now, some people might ask, why can't this work? Right? The same way that we're okay with a man taking care of a woman, well, why couldn't we be okay with a woman taking care of a man? And I think what happens is there's a fundamental self-respect that he loses in that dynamic. And it makes him resentful. Because on some level, he doesn't feel like a man. And that pains him. Even if he's comfortable, even if he's satisfied, even if he has everything he needs and he gets all the attention and all the adoration and all the sex and he gets to stay home and play video games all day or whatever, right? But even if he has everything he wants, part of him feels like he's just not a man. And that it's really self-hatred. But it's going to get projected onto her. He's going to feel like she's the one depriving him of his manhood. And it's going to create hatred in the relationship. Now, is that fair? No, it's not. She's not depriving him of his manhood. She's just the thing that's in his face every day, reminding him that he's not a man. But it goes both ways. Because if he were to really step in and own his masculinity and start being man of his own life, she wouldn't feel needed to him the way she does. And she couldn't survive the relationship. So there's a self-feeding loop here. The only men who can stay with her are the men who generally feel useless in their own lives. And she becomes a constant reminder to them of how they're not being that man for themselves. Now, I want to just address a couple of things here because this can sound very much like a manosphere type of conversation, and I want to be really clear. I'm not telling women to go back to the kitchen and go back to doing laundry and let men do the real work. I'm talking about the ways that masculinity and femininity as natural essences interact with each other in relationship. And in fact, those type of philosophies like manosphere or trad wives or these type of philosophies, what they do is they take principles like what I'm discussing here, but they don't have the depth to really understand how they work. And so they reduce them to really basic physical things like woman stay in the kitchen, man go out and earn the money. That's a very shallow understanding of what I'm saying here. These dynamics can exist between two people who both run multi-million-dollar careers, and they have someone else do all the cooking for them. Right? Like, I'm not saying that she needs to be a helpless little thing that just stays small and lets him do everything for her. What I'm saying is that he needs to feel like man of his own life inside the relationship, and she needs to allow the space for him to feel like that. And in the caretaker blueprint, she doesn't allow that space because him being man of his own life immediately threatens her ability to feel needed by him. That's the problem. Now, not only does it threaten her ability to feel needed by him, but it deprives him of the two things he needs most. One, the ability to provide, which I've already talked a lot about, the ability to offer something to the relationship. But second, and this is important, I don't want to gloss over this, his ability to be appreciated for it. This is the part that often gets left out. We talk about how men need to provide, how the masculine is the provider, how he needs to be able to offer something. That's a trope that's been spoken about too much, honestly. But what we often don't talk about is his need to be appreciated for what he provides. And that's like food to his soul. I touched on this a little bit when I said, he needs to look into his woman's eyes and he needs to see her adoration and her appreciation for him. And like, this is the thing that drives the masculine. But that's something I think we don't really take into account is like what a man needs to feel what a man needs to feel with his partner is that like he shows up with something that she needs and she receives it and she looks at him like she's so grateful to receive it. That's the him being a hero. And, this is something that I think it's hard for a lot of women to give a man that satisfaction. And understandably so. Because when we look at what women have had to endure, it makes sense that you would want to withhold that to some degree. It makes sense that you would say, like, no, I'm not just going to give you that adoration. I'm not just going to make you feel that way. And that has come from a history of trauma that women have experienced at the hands of men. And like it's such a vulnerable position to be in the feminine. Because as I said earlier, the feminine is the receiver, the masculine is the provider. And this is distinct from gender roles. I'm not talking about men and women here. I'm talking about energies. So same thing I said with a woman with her child, she's the masculine, the child is the feminine. Because the child is dependent. And historically, women have been dependent. Because the cultures that women were brought up in, the structure that women were brought up in, they were forced to be inherently dependent on men. And women have had to fight really hard to be independent. And so to work so hard to be independent, to work so hard to have the right to be woman of your own life, to not have to depend on a man for anything, and then to choose to step into the feminine of your own volition, to give a man that place in your life. It's such a vulnerable position. I don't take that lightly. This is where the manosphere shit is way wrong, because the manosphere acts like they're entitled to that. Like women are just supposed to be in their feminine for them. And something I often say, I'm sure if you listen to the podcast, you've heard me say this, is you don't just enter into your feminine for any man. You enter into your feminine for a man who has earned the right to hold the masculine space in your life. If we talk about, because there's another blueprint type, which I'm not going to get into in today's episode, but there's another blueprint type that immediately drops into the feminine with every man she meets. And that's equally toxic. That's equally destructive. But I'm not going to get into that right now. The caretaker is the one who's unwilling to surrender the masculine at all. She needs to be the provider. And in doing that, she deprives men in her life of the very fuel they need to feel alive in a relationship with her. Because it is so vulnerable to be needy. It requires no vulnerability to be needed. But it requires a lot of vulnerability to be needy, to need, to let yourself need a man, and not only to let yourself need him, but let him see that you need him, to give him that experience of being your hero. And yet at the same time, let me put it this way. That's the only meal in the entire universe that a man will keep coming back for day after day after day for the rest of his life. That's it. Sex he can get elsewhere. Validation he can get elsewhere. Success he can get elsewhere. But when he has a place where he can actually give of himself and he can be the hero, he'll never leave. And that's an incredible skill for the modern woman. And I don't want to diminish that. I don't want to make it sound like it's like an easy thing to do. Women have worked so hard to earn their independence, and now I'm saying you got to put it down if you ever want to keep a man in your life. That's a big ask. I get that that's a big ask. And So I want to come back to a statement I made earlier. Because I said that you should never surrender into your feminine with a man unless he has earned the right to hold the masculine space for you. And there's a little nuance in that, but I don't know if I have time to get into all of it today. But let me just say this. A man earns the right through creating safety. If he demonstrates to you that he is safe enough for you to need him, to let yourself need him, safe enough for you to be vulnerable enough to show that you need him, to make him feel like that hero. If he shows you that he's safe enough to do that, that's when you let him hold that space. And your job is actually to discern which man creates that kind of safety for you. But if you're stuck inside this blueprint, this is the rub. You're never going to feel that any man is safe enough for that. Because the blueprint itself says it's not safe to need, it's only safe to be needed. Remember, if we touch back on how this was wired into your nervous system, if we look at the parentified child, if we look at the child who was the emotional anchor for the family, the child who was the stable one in a chaotic environment, every impression of love you've received your entire life told you that love equated to being needed. That's literally how your nervous system experiences love and belonging. And if we look at the consequence of when you were a child in that environment, if you let yourself be needy, if you let yourself be the dependent one, there may have literally been lives at stake. For some of you, if you didn't feed your younger siblings, they didn't eat. For some of you, if you didn't manage the emotional environment of the household, people physically got hurt. Like, these are not low stakes. And some of you may have had less intense versions of that. I get it. But whatever version you had, this is the impression that was wired into your nervous system. So we're talking about, on the one hand, your identity says, if I'm not needed, if I'm not taking care of everyone, if I'm not making everyone happy, I literally don't exist. That's how I am significant in the world. And on the other hand, it's like, if I don't do this, people starve, people get hurt. I'm not safe. I'm not okay. I get hurt. These are not low stakes, and this is what your nervous system was trained in. And so this is what you're literally facing in the moment you're in a relationship with a man and you're surrendering that masculine spot to him. That's scary. That's terrifying. And I want to honor that. The other side I want to name, because this has come up with a lot of my clients who I've worked through this pattern with, is that in addition to the nervous system feeling all of that and having like a physical, visceral reaction, there's also the idea that to give less is unloving. It's like, I could do his taxes, but I'm going to tell him to do his own taxes. And now I feel like I'm unloving because I could do more, but I don't. And this is where you've got to see that doing his taxes does not equal love. And I'm using doing his taxes as something that came up with a client recently. That's why I'm using that example. But doing his dishes, paying his bills, paying for dinners, planning all the things you do together, taking all the initiative about everything in the relationship, like any number of these things, right? That does not equate to love. That equates to creating a condition in the relationship in which your nervous system feels secure. And that and love are two different things. We could argue that the more loving thing would be to let him be the hero, even at the expense of your own discomfort. Like, if we talk about what love is you wanting to give the other person what they want, even at an inconvenience to you. Rather than doing for them things they could do for themselves just to make yourself feel safe. Rather than not allowing any of your needs to be seen just to make yourself feel safe. And every caretaker I've ever spoken to, when they really get honest underneath it all, they all say the same thing. They say, I don't really want to be this way. I am exhausted. I am physically exhausted. I am mentally exhausted. I am emotionally exhausted. I don't want to have to carry the relationship on my back. I don't want to have to do his laundry and his dishes and all of this stuff. Like, I don't want to have to find the therapist or be the coach in the relationship. Like, I would love it to be with a man who does all of that. And when we really get down to it, they see that they are self-selecting for the men who lack that capacity because they just don't feel safe in a different environment. And so love would be not only giving him the space to feel like a hero, but giving yourself the space for your nervous system to rest, for your nervous system to settle, to be able to find peace and ease in being taken care of. And every time I've worked with someone in this pattern, underneath the stories of there are no men out there who want to do that, or every man I meet is lazy, or where are the real men who are real providers, underneath all those stories, we get down to one fundamental truth. If I were truly in a relationship with a man who wanted to take care of me, and I let him do that, I would feel like I have no place in the relationship, and I would be terrified he was going to leave me. And so what we find is all of that caretaking is not an authentic expression of love. It's simply a pattern designed to make you feel safe. And what you find again and again and again and again when you live in this pattern is every man you end up with is a taker. And every man that wants to provide for you just doesn't have space to do so in the relationship. And the reality is that over any significant period of time, both of them leave. Because the provider can't feel fulfilled in the relationship. And the child gets tired of looking in the mirror every day and just having to face how little of a man he is. That is the painful predicament of this type of blueprint. And so if you've resonated with today's episode, I want to invite you to go ahead and take my relational blueprint quiz. It's 15 questions. You can take it in maybe 10 minutes or less. And what it's going to do is it's going to help you identify your blueprint. Now, if you strongly resonated with everything I talked about in today's episode, you're probably a caretaker, but you also may find that you have elements of caretaker, but there's actually one of the other blueprints that's a little more prominent for you. But this quiz is going to help you identify your primary blueprint. And then what you'll have the opportunity to do after you take the quiz is I can send you a personalized video really breaking down this blueprint for you in detail so you can really understand exactly what it is and why it's happening this way for you. And then if you want to take it one step further, you can book a personalized audit with my team where we can sit down with you one-on-one and we can actually map a personalized healing path for you based on your specific blueprint. And this is exactly what I've been doing with all my clients in the Inspired Love program for the last decade, is working with them based on their specific blueprint to design a personalized healing path for that blueprint. And now, by starting with this quiz, you can do the exact same thing for yourself. So you can take the quiz by going to the link in the show notes, or you can go to inspiredloveapproach.com/blueprint. You can find it there as well. Again, less than 10 minutes, you can take the quiz. You can get a personalized video where I break your blueprint down for you. And then if you want to take it one step further, book that audit with my team so we can sit down with you one-on-one and really map out your personalized healing journey. I want to thank everybody for being with me in today's episode. If you resonated with this, I want to send love to all my caretakers out there. I resonate with that blueprint a lot, and I definitely get it. So there's no shame in identifying any of this, right? It wasn't your fault that you were born into the circumstances that you were born into. It wasn't your fault that your nervous system learned to interpret love and safety in a certain way, and it's not your fault that you've been doing that ever since. That's just what happens as a human being inside of a complex system. But we do have a responsibility to really wake up to how our patterns are shaping our relationships and choose to do something about that. And that's what I'm offering you right now. You can identify the pattern, you can name it, you can get some deeper understanding about it, and you can map out your personalized path forward so you can finally heal this pattern and start relating from a place of authentic love and intimacy. So thanks again for being with me, everybody. Lots of love and blessings. I'll be back with you next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.